Have you ever found yourself stuck in a relationship that feels like a game of emotional hide-and-seek, where just as you start to get close, the other person pulls away? I'm Jim Rohn, and if that question made your chest tighten a little, you're not alone. Here's the truth. Many people are caught in relationships that feel one-sided. You give, wait, hope, overthink. They retreat, deflect, shut down. You question your worth. They protect their distance, and the cycle repeats, leaving you feeling like love is always just out of reach. But what if the issue isn't that you're too much? What if the real problem is a nervous system trained to chase crumbs, not connection? Avoidantly attached partners often seem cool, calm, even indifferent on the surface. But beneath that aloof exterior is often a deep discomfort with intimacy, a fear of being known. And here's the surprising part. Once you stop trying to prove your worth and start honoring your emotional reality, everything changes. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly what happens when you stop chasing and start choosing yourself. You'll understand the avoidant dynamic in a way that's not about blaming them, but about liberating you. Because once you see the pattern clearly, you don't unsee it. And once you reclaim your power, avoidant strategies no longer hold the same control. This is the turning point. From anxiety to clarity, from performing to belonging, from walking on eggshells to walking in truth. So if you're ready to stop losing yourself in someone else's avoidance and start building the secure, connected love you deserve, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. There's so much grounded, eye-opening truth coming your way, and I don't want you to miss any of it. Your clarity is their collapse. And your healing? That starts now. Sometimes the people we care about the most are the ones who seem impossible to reach. You show up with openness, with care, with a genuine desire to connect, and they shut down. They pull away, become distant, emotionally blank. It's like standing in front of someone who built an entire wall around their heart and called it being independent. What you're seeing isn't real emotional strength, it's protection. An avoidantly attached person often doesn't feel safe being seen. Somewhere along the line, they learned that vulnerability was dangerous, that expressing needs led to pain, and that staying guarded was the safest way to survive. So they freeze, they retreat, they armor up, and from the outside, it looks like they don't care. But that's not the truth. Here's the mistake many people make. You sense that there's someone soft and human underneath the surface, and you think, if I just love them hard enough, they'll let me in. So you stay, you overgive. You silence your own needs to make room for their fears. But that's not love, that's self-abandonment. And a secure person knows better. A secure person doesn't try to break down someone's emotional walls. They don't chase, push, or perform for approval. They stay with their own truth. They ask themselves, is this relationship honoring who I am? Or am I constantly betraying myself to hold it together? When you stop over-functioning in the dynamic, the energy shifts. You're no longer the one holding the whole relationship up. No longer making yourself small to earn someone else's love. And that's when things become clear. Without your chasing, their avoidance is no longer hidden. Their emotional distance is no longer masked by your effort. Sometimes, when you finally step back and reclaim your self-respect, the entire dynamic crumbles, not because you attacked them, but because you stopped giving your power away. That's the turning point. That's what sets you free. You don't have to break down someone's defenses to be worthy of connection. You only have to stop betraying yourself for love. When you live from that place of clarity and emotional maturity, you'll never need to beg for closeness again. If someone can't meet you there, you'll know it's not because you're too much. It's because they're not ready, and your worth isn't up for negotiation. Their biggest weakness, maybe the most fragile truth beneath all the armor, is this: they can't bear to be fully seen, and yet they desperately long for it. That's the heart of the avoidant paradox. The The very thing they crave is the thing they fear. I came across a thread recently that captured this so perfectly. It asked, what do avoidant people actually want in a relationship? And the answers were like striking emotional gold. So many people described avoidance as leaving the moment things get too real, wanting connection, but only if it happens exactly on their terms. And here's the catch. They won't actually tell you what those terms are. You only find out once you've accidentally crossed one. Then suddenly, you're the problem. You're too much. You push too hard. You're the reason they shut down. One comment stuck with me. It was from someone reflecting on their ex who had a deeply avoidant pattern. She admitted that what she truly wanted was a relationship, but she only realized it after she pushed him away. During their time together, any emotional closeness triggered her to retreat. Even minor conflict made her disappear. And every time they started to feel emotionally close, she suddenly needed distance, not because she didn't care, but because she was terrified of what it meant to stay open. Let's go back to the statue for a moment. Take a closer look at its surface. See that tiny mark, a faint hairline crack running through the stone. It's the first sign of a deeper fracture forming, and that crack exists because of the war going on inside the avoidant, one part of them aching to be seen, the other terrified of exposure. That's the tension, that's the weak spot. And once you can spot it, the question becomes, how do you respond without losing yourself? In the community I teach, there's a phrase we come back to over and over again. When they pull back, you pull back. Not as punishment, not as a tactic, but as a mirror. You match their energy, not to teach them a lesson, but to stay rooted in your own emotional dignity. When they go quiet, you don't over-explain. When they retreat, you don't chase. You reflect their pace not from fear, but from calm clarity. Because here's the truth. When someone is drowning in fear, what they need isn't someone diving in after them. It's someone who stays grounded on shore and says, you're safe when you're ready. And that stillness, that non-reactive, non-anxious presence, it's disarming. It speaks to the part of them behind the armor, the one that's listening for safety. And that's when something small but powerful happens. The crack deepens, just enough for light to start breaking through. The second weak spot is one most people never realize, because on the surface it looks like the avoidant has all the control, but the truth is, they lose that control completely the moment they feel emotionally flooded. What looks like coldness is often just dysregulation, and what looks like disinterest is usually fear. Avoidant individuals tend to shut down, withdraw, or stonewall, not because they're powerful, but because they're overwhelmed. But here's the twist. They don't stay gone forever. They often come back, just not to anxiety, not to pressure, not to someone chasing them down with desperation disguised as care. They return only to something that feels safe, something that doesn't threaten their fragile internal world. And this is where most people, especially anxiously attached partners, fall into the same trap. Because the moment the avoidant starts pulling away, the anxious system panics. You feel it in your chest, your stomach, your thoughts spinning into overdrive. What did I do wrong? Should I text again? Should I explain more clearly? Maybe they didn't understand how much I care. And so the cycle begins. Messages get longer, check-ins get more frequent, and emotional intensity skyrockets. But none of that brings them closer. In fact, it sends them running deeper into the cave. Why? Because avoidants aren't drawn to emotion that feels like demand. They've been conditioned, often from childhood, to associate closeness with being smothered, criticized, or controlled. So your sincere attempts at connection feel, to them, like pressure. That's why one of the most powerful things you can do when an avoidant withdraws is nothing. Not as punishment, not as strategy, but as a signal that says, I trust myself enough not to chase. This is where the phrase I teach, when they pull back, you pull back, comes in. It's not a game. It's not silence meant to manipulate. It's nervous system alignment, it's emotional maturity, and it works because it breaks the pattern they've come to expect. Most avoidants have a history of dating anxious partners. That means they already have an emotional memory, whether conscious or not, of what typically happens when they pull away. They expect panic, they expect pursuit.
They expect to be emotionally cornered, so when you don't react that way, when you offer stillness instead of strategy, you're interrupting the entire story they've rehearsed. And that stillness speaks volumes. It says, you're allowed to have space, but I'm not abandoning myself to give it to you. That kind of non-reactive calm disorients the avoidant in a good way. It tells their nervous system, this isn't danger. This isn't someone trying to control you. This is safety. This is respect. But it only works if your calm is real, if it's performative, if you're holding back externally while spiraling internally, they will feel it because nervous systems talk to each other. So when I say give space, I mean truly ground yourself, let them go.
And not with a secret hope that they'll come running back. Let them go because clinging to someone who doesn't feel ready is a form of self-neglect. Let them go because your worth doesn't decrease when someone else disappears. And yes, here's the part that most people miss. Avoidants often do come back, but they only come back to presence, not panic. They return when what's waiting for them isn't a storm of emotional urgency, but a steady fire they can trust won't consume them. They return to warmth that doesn't ask for proof, to presence that doesn't demand closeness but allows for it. So no, this isn't about making them miss you. That's the wrong question. This is about becoming the kind of person who doesn't chase what hurts them, who doesn't beg for crumbs, who doesn't mistake emotional chaos for passion. And that takes courage. It takes practice. But it's the very thing that opens the door to real connection. Not forced, not frantic, but freely chosen. And for the avoidant, that's the only kind of intimacy they can ever truly accept. Because it doesn't threaten their freedom, it invites them into safety. Ah, there it is. Another fracture showing up on the surface of the statue. A third weak point, and this one goes deeper than the others. It's not about behavior, it's about origin. See? Underneath all the emotional distancing, the pullbacks, the cool detachment, there's a blueprint. And for many avoidant people, that original blueprint was fear. Let's take a step back. Up to now, we've talked about the avoidant defense system as a way to guard against intimacy. But Mary Main, one of the founding researchers in attachment theory, discovered something even more haunting. In some cases, the wall wasn't just built to create distance. It was built as a survival mechanism because the person they were supposed to run toward for safety was also the source of fear. In her research on disorganized attachment, she observed that children in this category didn't just pull away from their caregiver. They'd move toward them and then recoil. They'd reach out and then freeze. They'd approach with hesitation, as if unsure whether this person would comfort or harm them. That's not confusion. That's trauma. Let that sink in. How does a child learn to attach when the person they need is also the person they fear? The answer is, they don't. They split. The drive to connect stays alive, but it gets buried under protective patterns. The longing never disappears. It just goes underground, covered in behaviors we later recognize as avoidance. Now, I'm not saying this excuses the behavior. I'm saying it gives you clarity. It gives you an opportunity to stop taking their fear personally and start recognizing it for what it is, a wound that existed long before you showed up. Most people interpret avoidant withdrawal as rejection, and when that happens, they typically respond in one of three ways. They chase, trying desperately to prove they're safe. They shut down and mirror the emotional coldness as a form of punishment. Or they get angry and write the person off entirely. And every one of those reactions reaffirms the avoidant's internal belief that closeness is dangerous. You've now confirmed the original blueprint. Intimacy equals overwhelm, equals loss of control. But what if, instead of chasing, detaching, or overcompensating, you responded with congruence? What if your words, tone, body, and energy all aligned into something the avoidant rarely, if ever, experiences? Emotional truth. Congruence is not saying I'm fine while your eyes are scanning them for signs of abandonment. It's not offering reassurance with a shaky voice and tense jaw. It's not pretending you're okay when you're clearly not, and then punishing them with silence. It's not trying to connect. It's being connection, and for someone whose blueprint is fear, congruence is deeply unfamiliar, but it's also deeply disarming. Because fear thrives in inconsistency. Fear feeds off people saying one thing and doing another, so when you show up in full alignment, not perfect but authentic, you're not reinforcing their trauma, you're interrupting it. Now, I know some of you listening right now are thinking, I was congruent, I did everything right, and it still didn't work. And to you, I want to speak with compassion, but also with clarity. The research and my own work tells me something hard to hear. Most, not all, but most people who struggle with avoidant partners are carrying their own anxious attachment. And anxious attachment is, by definition, incongruent. At the start of the relationship, everything probably felt easy, didn't it? You felt relaxed, you felt confident, you weren't asking too much, you weren't pushing, you didn't try to define the relationship on week 2. But here's what actually happened. Without realizing it, you and your avoidant partner entered into an unspoken agreement. The agreement went something like this: as long as I keep my emotions in check and you keep giving me just enough, we'll be fine. But here's the problem. That version of you wasn't sustainable. It was temporary, a performance. And when the dynamic inevitably shifted, maybe they texted less, maybe they seemed more distant, maybe their tone changed just slightly, you started to feel anxious. You began to overanalyze. You said, I'm fine, when you weren't. You tried to stay cool, but you punished them with silence. Or maybe you flooded them with reassurance they didn't ask for, hoping they'd calm your panic. Either way, the congruence disappeared. And from the avoidance perspective, something felt off. They might not have words for it, but they sense the misalignment. And when the congruence breaks, their fear blueprint gets activated. Suddenly, the relationship no longer feels safe. And here's the irony. Remember that Reddit thread I mentioned earlier? One commenter described this dynamic with eerie accuracy. They said, avoidants want a relationship on their terms, but they won't tell you what those terms are until you've crossed a boundary they never expressed. And once you do, suddenly you're the one at fault. You're the reason it's falling apart. You're the one who changed. The fourth weak spot is perhaps the most disorienting of them all. The avoidant builds the game and then dares you to survive it. In a previous video, I described it like this. Being with an avoidant partner often feels like entering a video game you never signed up for. You're dropped into a series of emotional landscapes, each one designed not to bring you closer but to make you give up. First, you find yourself in the glitch world, where they're inconsistent, hot and cold, confusing. Then comes the frozen zone, where their emotional expression vanishes and all you get is silence. Next, the mirror room, where they don't really show you who they are, but instead reflect back who they think you want them to be. And finally, the ghost level, where their past relationships live on, shaping the lens through which they see you. Just when you think you've earned enough trust to reach the final level, emotional intimacy, they hit the reset button. And suddenly, you're back at the beginning. No acknowledgement, no progress, no roadmap, just more uncertainty. And the only way to keep moving forward is to gather yourself and go through it all again. Because avoidant people aren't convinced by consistency once. They believe in repetition. They watch what you'll do again and again, even when it's painful, even when it doesn't make sense, even when you're exhausted. That's the catch. This weak spot isn't about healing them or finding the perfect strategy to open their heart. It's about enduring the emotional gauntlet long enough for them to believe that you're real. But here's where the game becomes dangerous. What starts as an emotional challenge can slowly turn into a trap, and for many people it does. Let's be honest. Just because someone's pain came from childhood, just because they armored themselves instead of learning to trust, does not mean their behavior can't be harmful. It can be emotionally abusive. It can erode your sense of self. It can slowly condition you to believe that asking for basic human connection is too much, that your needs are threats, that the price of love is self-abandonment. So what does it really mean to be brave in the game of an avoidant partner? It doesn't mean winning them. It means finding yourself in the process. It means staying long enough to see whether the cost of admission is worth who's inside the armor. Sometimes it is, and sometimes but either way, the real win, the true clarity, comes when you realize you never needed their final level to be whole. You never needed to beat their game to be worthy of love. Because love isn't something you win, it's something you recognize. And if the connection constantly asks you to shrink, suppress, or second-guess yourself, then maybe it's not love. Maybe it's a test you no longer have to take. The real strength isn't in making it to the end. It's in knowing when to step off the battlefield entirely, with your integrity, your nervous system, and your self-worth intact. And ironically, as we've seen again and again, that's the moment when avoidants tend to come back. Not when you prove yourself through pain, but when you choose yourself through peace. If you've made it this far, thank you. Really. Sitting with these truths isn't easy. It takes courage to look at relational patterns, especially the ones that hurt, and ask, what part of me keeps choosing this? In this video, we uncovered 4 deep vulnerabilities within avoidant attachment: the fear of being seen, the need for safe re-entry after overwhelm, the fear-based blueprint formed in childhood, and the emotional game built to test rather than trust. And through it all, one truth remains. The most powerful shift you can make is choosing your self-worth over emotional chasing, choosing alignment over performance, boundaries over breadcrumbs. Because you don't need to earn love by surviving someone else's wounds. You deserve a relationship where connection feels mutual, not like a maze you have to master to be enough. And the moment you stop proving and start honoring your truth, you begin to change, not just the relationship, but your entire experience of love. If this video spoke to something real in you, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What part resonated most? Have you seen yourself in any of these dynamics? Your story might help someone else feel a little less alone. And if you're on a journey of healing, of reclaiming your emotional clarity and choosing healthier connection, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. There's more insight coming, and I'd be honored to walk that path with you. You're not too much. You're not hard to love. You're just learning to stop chasing silence and start choosing peace. And that is the beginning of everything.